He had the proof. The documents were clear, transactions, signatures, names. Now all he had to do was craft the headline. And so, the whistleblower blows. Another institution, exposed for taking money from foreign powers.
This headline is not from today, and it's not from yesterday, and it's not even from ancient times like the USSR. No, we're talking about real history, real ancient times. We're talking about ancient Greece and Persia, the Achaemenid Empire. Let's dive in to that story.
Imagine waking up in ancient Athens. You go to the market, hearing whispers in every corner, claims that this politician or that commentator is being paid off by foreign powers. Everything sounds like a conspiracy theory. Is there anyone you can trust? You don't want drama. You want stability. Quiet. You're tired of the arguments, so you disengage. Unbeknown to you, this is the start of the end of democracy.
Nothing is new under the sun, and if you know what I'm quoting, good for you. Write it down in comments. All right, so a superpower tries to buy loyalty of its rivals. It bribes politicians, it funds intellectuals, it thinks it's controlling the board. But the money doesn't just corrupt, it creates the war machine that will destroy them. Karma is a bitch. And what goes around comes around. Because that newly found dictatorship built an army and came back with a vengeance and brought down that Eastern superpower that tried to bribe its politicians.
Back in Athens, you are now old. You're trying to explain to your grandson what democracy is. He doesn't understand. Don't be sad, Grandpa. I will bring everything you lost back to you. He heads out the door.
This is the story of the end of the first democracy and the fall of the Persian Empire. And it is a warning.
A decade later, and you're still alive, he returns, bestowing upon you all the riches you'd lost. Look, I brought back our glory, he says, eyes sparkling. Thank you, grandson. You smile. But you would have traded all that glory for freedom. It's too late. All I wanted was to criticize the king, you say. Why would you want that? Your grandson asks.
In the 5th century BC, Athens was not like other cities. It was a political, military, and cultural leader. All over the Greek world, there was nothing like Athens. Beautiful, pretty, and strong. But the most important part is, of course, it was the first democracy in the world. It was also a naval empire, like another country I know. Athens is the birthplace of drama, philosophy, and political debate. An art that probably also died there. I have other videos about that if you guys want to check. Of course, the price of that, the price of being a strong, independent, is constant war. Because in this life, it's either that you fight for your position or you submit. And Athens didn't want to submit until the Persian Empire came and found its weakness, money. If you're watching this video and you're thinking, oh no, I see where it's going, and how do I change that? Then I have an offer for you. Join my course. It starts in September. It's called Understanding Humanity. It's packed, it's active, and it's the best course. And there is nothing like it. I sent it to very famous people higher up, so said, I've never seen anything like it. So please, if you care and if you want to change, sign up to this course, Understanding Humanity. The link is in the description below. All right, let's go back. The Peloponnesian War drained Athens' finances, fractured its society, and shook public confidence. Wars, they have a price. They create debt, and if you go to Iraq or Afghanistan for too long, well, why am I mixing up things? Sorry. Yeah, they were fighting their wars and, took it all of them, which it does. It's normal. It's normal. But unfortunately, for the average person who doesn't understand the threat and the alternative, it breaks their trust. Society crumbles. And they're open, and they become susceptible to new philosophical ideas. Less democratic, unfortunately. And into this moment of weakness stepped an old familiar enemy, the Persian Empire. Why fight when you can bribe? Persia had tried to conquer Greece before, at Marathon, at Salamis, and it failed. So they changed strategy. Instead of sending armies, they sent gold. Persian satraps, provincial governors, quietly began funding rival city-states in Greece. Support Sparta when it hurts Athens, support Athens when it hurts Sparta, and so on and so forth.
Persia's late classical influence campaign relied on its satraps, governors like Pharnabazus and Tissaphernes, who kept large, discretionary gold reserves for political use. The method was simple: fund one Greek city-state against another, then switch sides as needed, preventing a united front against Persia.
Divide and conquer. Always keep the Greeks too busy to unite. Gold, which was in abundance in the Persian Empire, started flowing into politicians, generals, and even philosophers, the influencers of the time.
They also targeted opinion makers. Greek philosophers, historians, and orators could shift public sentiment as effectively as generals. If a respected voice promoted peace with Persia, oligarchy over democracy, or cooperation with Macedon, it advanced Persian goals without a single battle.
Some intellectuals, oh, I love intellectuals. What they did is to start arguing in favor of having peace with Persia. But here's the catch: on Persian terms. They were advocating to submit to Persia, living by whatever Persia dictates.
Examples include Isocrates, whose later works urged unity under a single leader, a role that fell to Macedon; Plato, whose preference for enlightened monarchy was seen as weakening democratic resolve; and Aeschines, accused by Demosthenes of taking Persian bribes to oppose war. Even Herodotus spent time at the Persian court under royal patronage. By combining direct payments with ideological influence, Persia kept Greece divided and secured its own strategic advantage, at least for a time.
What do you think? Do they really believed in that peace? Or was it just money? Well, who can say? And it works. By 387 BCE, Greece signed the so-called King's Peace, where they recognized the Persian takeover of several Greek cities in Asia Minor. Athens went from being a democracy that fought and defied the greatest empires into a gold digger that took foreign money and sold its allies. While Athens and Sparta tore each other apart, a new player emerged up in the north. Macedonia, however you say it in English, but you get my gist. At first, Persia saw Macedonia as a tool. They thought this is going to be a useful pawn that would keep the Greeks distracted. They, like many others, underestimated Philip II, a brilliant strategist that did not play according to other people's rules. By 338 BC, Philip had crushed Athens and Thebes at Konya, uniting Greece under Macedonian leadership. A leadership that was a lot less democratic and way more tyrannical. And when Philip was assassinated, his 20-year-old son, Alexander, took the throne. And the throne wasn't the only thing he inherited. Greece was already united, battle-ready. One great way to combat those foreign influences is to make sure that your philosophers and influencers and people that you believe should be leading the philosophical and idea-creating aspect of society, that they don't starve, that they wouldn't suffer, that they would not think about, oh, where would I get my next meal? And definitely that they wouldn't run out of coffee, because without the coffee, their judgment might be a little lacking. So please, to avoid that, go to Buy Me Coffee and make sure I have enough caffeine to continue doing what I'm doing. And also, if Buy Me Coffee doesn't work for you for some reason, also have PayPal and Patreon, and there are super thanks comments that you can do here in the comment section. Thank you so much for your support. I cannot do it without it. All right, let's go back. Persia didn't fall because it lost the battle. It fell because it believed it can control the future with money. But money and people are unpredictable. Persia didn't read the map. It didn't see that there is a brewing change. And it continued doing and playing the same old game. But things were different. They couldn't divide Greek anymore. No one to argue. When nobody is allowed to say what they think, because there is no free speech, because there is no democracy, well, how would you make them fight? Over what? What can they argue over? It's what the king decides. That's it. That's the truth. That is God. Beautiful. Their old methods of making the Greeks fight each other and argue didn't work anymore. So now they had a lot of free time. Less debate and everything. So they had to rethink their entertainment. And Alexander the Great, he decided to turn his army and go to the east. In just over a decade, the mighty Persian Empire that lasted for centuries, poof, it was gone. Persepolis burned. The empire that bought its enemies ended up sponsoring its destroyer. History. It doesn't necessarily repeat, but it rhymes. It rhymes beautifully, so listen to this music. This story, did it sound familiar? Did it ring a bell? You see, foreign gold still flows. That system, that way of thinking, it's the same. It works just as it did 2,400 years ago, though it doesn't look as cool as it used to. Back then, you had those convoys that were carrying gold. Now you just wire money. Give it to universities, you give it to think tanks, influencers, the philosophers, intellectuals, politicians, and generals of today. What would have been the equivalent of the media that we have now? I wonder if Persia, they also had their own Al Jazeera and Al Arabiya and BBC to spread their propaganda. I don't know if you heard about the bot farms that amplified voices that went against Trump just to split the Republican base. It works the same way. You divide, you split, you create rivalries. Fake them if needed. Divide and conquer. And it's not just that. You make sure that instead of focusing on their long borders that they have, or countries that are big and mighty, make sure they focus all their attention on something insignificant, tiny, but very divisive. It's a distraction. Instead of looking at the forest and understanding that there is a forest in front of you, you look at a tree, just a tree, one tree, and you say, okay, there is a tree here, and you ignore the forest. And all you talk about is whether the tree should look like this or like that, or like this or like that. But the bears, they hide behind very different trees. They just very enjoy the fact that you focus on that one tree, and they can just keep praying under the shadows of all the other trees, actually. Now imagine a rich entity that goes around and funds everything and anything with the sole goal of making democracy weaker. Just kidding. No need to imagine. Nothing personal. Democracy is shirk. And democracy is not communism either. But I want to take a moment and focus on those who pretend to be friends. In the end of this video, adjacent to it, is a whole list of what not just Qatar did, which is the main villain everybody likes pointing out to, but also the UAE and Saudi Arabia. The Gulf states, in general, did a lot. All of them.
The nation of Qatar, unfortunately, has historically been a funder of terrorism at a very high level.
But here is the important thing that Persia had not taken into account. Things can change. All the monsters, all tendencies, all the ways of thinking might reemerge and take over. All that investment into weakening the West also has a side effect. The side effect is that it erodes democracy, that every leader believes they should be more in charge. And because the people are desperate, they give it to them because chaos is the scariest thing. A quick reminder that a really good way to make sure we don't forget our history is by learning the Bible, the Old Testament and the New Testament. There is a link below to an app that my dear friend had built in order to help the Western world regain its confidence. That app is called The Bible Way. And if you want to support me and get a discount from a yearly subscription, use the promo code Rebecca. Thanks to the fact that, let's say, a superpower like the United States today, which is the West, it's the new Athens, if you'd like, is democratic, nations with a weaker army, they can keep their wealth and the treasures of the ground that they live on. If the system in the United States changes, if the thinking changes from something super democratic to something more dictatorial, there might come one day a leader that would look at the tiny nation of Qatar and the way it spends its money and would say, wait, our military bases are there. All they do is import slaves. Their women don't have rights. It's just a family that likes terrorism in the world. Who found the oil? Who built the industry? Who did everything? I don't think they did that much. Probably don't deserve it. It's mine now. It's mine. What would stop them? You see, the only reason the United States is not doing it right now, psychological. They have certain principles, certain rules. It will all might go fly out of the window. Just so you know, Qatar, you're playing with fire. Just because your adversaries are stupid now, they might be more stupid tomorrow, but in a different way, and not in a way that would work for you. It's a risk, you know. And what might happen here is that one day a president would come, maybe in the United States, maybe somewhere else. It could be China, it could be something else. It could be a Chinese American that would have a certain kind of thinking. And then what would happen? You know, all that investment could be rewired, rewritten. The infrastructure for brainwashing is there. Thank you. Yes, it was mostly the USSR who did that. And then it was taken over by people who don't care about that ideology at all. But just like it was taken over now by whatever floats your boat, it can be rewritten again, and that infrastructure can be used again. How? Who? Who would do it? What kind of ideology that would be? That is a question that we don't have the answer for yet, but it will probably happen, and it will come. So who is Persia today? Who is Athens? Who is Macedonia? Who is what? Who is Sparta? Who's playing what role? What do you guys think? Write your play, right? We have a play, imagine a theater. What country, what nation would play what role in that theater? Who would you even audition to begin with? And then who would you choose?
And in the wake of that conference, nations came together and spoke to me about confronting Qatar over its behavior. So we had a decision to make. Do we take the easy road, or do we finally take a hard but necessary action?
It isn't just a story about the past. It's a warning. It's a warning. The oldest democracy in the world didn't last. It took maybe how long later? for democracy to return? Endless amount of time. Things we take for granted can be taken away from us. Foreign money, that's a dangerous game for everyone who chooses to play it.
The time had come to call on Qatar to end its funding. They have to end that funding. And its extremist ideology in terms of funding.
The only question left is, do you think this time we would manage to turn things around? Keep our belief system, not succumb to something that would take our way of living from us? Or would we just walk blindly along the same path? Even though now we have everything written. History at our disposal. The lessons written down. The thing that we will now discover is, did we learn anything?
I want to call on all of the nations to stop immediately supporting terrorism. Stop teaching people to kill other people. Stop filling their minds with hate and intolerance. I won't name other countries, but we are not done solving the problem, but we will solve that problem.
Okay, everybody, thank you so much for watching. Like, comment, subscribe. Share that with a friend. And again, please consider supporting this channel by going to Patreon, PayPal, Buy Me Coffee, or even here, super thanks in the comments. It helps me. It really does.
We have to stop the funding of terrorism.
All right. Thank you for watching. See you later.
Gulf states, especially Saudi Arabia, Qatar, and the UAE, have funded forces that eventually became direct enemies of the United States. Al-Qaeda's roots lie in the 1980s and 90s, financed by wealthy Gulf donors and channeled through charities during the Soviet-Afghan War. Some of the same fighters later carried out the 1998 U.S. Embassy bombings, the USS Cole attack, and 9/11. The Taliban enjoyed Saudi and later Qatari backing, with formal recognition from both Saudi Arabia and the UAE in the 1990s. Qatar even hosted their political offices. They sheltered al-Qaeda before 9/11 and fought U.S. and NATO forces for 20 years. Early funding for ISIS came from private donors in Saudi Arabia, Kuwait, and Qatar. At first, they were seen as a counter to Iran-backed militias in Iraq and Assad's forces in Syria. They went on to declare war on the West, carry out global terror attacks, and inspire violence inside the United States. Qatar remains Hamas's most visible supporter today, sending hundreds of millions in aid, with Saudi and UAE donors also contributing in the past. Hamas has targeted U.S. allies directly and aligned with other anti-U.S. groups. During the Syrian civil war, private Gulf donations, especially from Kuwait and Qatar, flowed to al-Nusra Front, al-Qaeda's Syrian branch. U.S.-backed rebel groups were undermined or absorbed in the process. Other Islamist networks have benefited too. Qatar gave media platforms and safe haven to the Muslim Brotherhood's leadership, and Gulf donors financed Libyan factions like Ansar al-Sharia, which later attacked U.S. diplomatic missions in 2012. The methods have evolved since Persian gold in the Agora, but the principle is the same. Influence a rival's political, cultural, and economic center without appearing as the enemy. Today, Gulf states work through 6 main channels. Political lobbying and advisory roles for former officials give them direct policy access. Think tank funding shapes research and public debate. University endowments and cultural sponsorships create networks of sympathetic academics. Media control ranges from owning outlets like Al Jazeera to buying advertising that influences coverage. Sovereign wealth funds invest billions in Western real estate, tech, and infrastructure, creating relationships too lucrative to risk. And luxury diplomacy, gifts, trips, speaking fees, and elite event hospitality seals personal loyalties. Ancient Persia bought city-state leaders and thinkers with visible treasure. Modern Gulf states by the gatekeepers of policy and public opinion in ways harder to trace but just as effective, shaping which wars are fought, which allies are protected, and which stories never get told.
Now, if you reached this far, write "Thank you, Dad" in the comments because that video was my dad's idea. Alright, see you later everybody. Thank you for being here.